Hey everyone, welcome into Eyes on Golf. This is last time I kind of did one of these, I called it an emergency podcast. I'm calling this a mini podcast. It is about 3:30 p.m. on Wednesday, January 31st, and I felt like I had to do something here to get all of my thoughts down, but also explain to you what just happened with the PGA Tour and Strategic Sports Group today. So that's what we'll be talking about for the next 15 minutes or so. First half, I'll explain. Second half, I will give my thoughts. We had heard a lot of smoke about this, obviously, for a while, a couple months back. The Strategic Sports Group emerging from the pack of potential PGA Tour investors not named the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. And this group is made up of a consortium of American sports owners with Fenway Sports Group at the lead. So John Henry, Tom Warner, they're kind of leading the pack of this group, but we knew there would be so many other names involved. Didn't maybe know till today exactly who would be in that investment group, but we now do have an official list because the Strategic Sports Group is investing $3 billion into the PGA Tour. The language is still perhaps a little bit loose. It seems like 1.5 will be coming in right away. But 3 billion is the number at what is reported. I know I saw Barstool Sports' Dan Rappaport say this. It's not in the PGA Tour press release, but what is reported at a valuation of $12 billion for PGA Tour Enterprises, which is the new for-profit venture by the PGA Tour. To be headquartered, it seems, in Ponte Vedra Beach, Florida. I once again should preface that I am an independent contractor to the PGA Tour. So if you don't trust me speaking on this, you can stop now. We're 2 minutes in, but that is what I do, and that is where what we have heard about this PGA Tour Enterprises, including the Korn Ferry Tour, PGA Tour champions, how the DP World Tour will be involved. It appears that is still to be seen. In the press release today, there was a report. It was not a report. It was said that the strategic partnership continues with the PGA Tour and the DP World Tour, the European Tour. So that's all happening. So the $3 billion comes in. Who are these guys at Strategic Sports Group, along with John Henry and Tom Warner, along with those involved from a Fenway Sports Group perspective? Some of the other names on there: Steve Cohen, the owner of the New York Mets; Arthur Blank, the owner of the Atlanta Falcons. I'll tell you that Wick Grosback, the owner of the Boston Celtics, is on the list. Mark Lasry, who owned the Milwaukee Bucks, is on the list. So there's a lot of big names, a lot of big money American sports owners who are now part of this $3 billion investment in the PGA Tour. Even if you read the fine print, there's a part there about additional Fenway Sports Group investors. And LeBron James and Maverick Carter's name, I did not expect that show up on this PGA Tour press release as technically additional investors through their additional investment into Fenway Sports Group. So I'm saying maybe LeBron's got to stop by the Genesis Invitational in a couple weeks down there in Los Angeles, or that actually might be NBA All-Star Weekend. So he's got to go on the early side. He's got to go on Wednesday or Thursday. You can check out the whole list on PGAtour.com or wherever you can find it. There's a lot of other names there, a lot of minority owners, a lot of Fenway Sports Group folks on that list too. Jay Monahan will continue on as of now as PGA Tour Commissioner and as CEO of PGA Tour Enterprises. $1.5 billion of this, I said $1.5 billion appears to be coming right up front. That will focus on will have a strategic focus on maximizing revenue generation for the benefit of the players and on finding opportunities to enhance the game of golf around the world. So it seems like that is a way of saying $1.5 million is going to go right into this right now in terms of finding ways to create revenue for the PGA Tour. Another 1.5 billion, not necessarily from this 3 billion. Remember that a lot of this is going to end up being equity for the PGA Tour, for the PGA Tour players. And this is in the release that players can access over 1.5 billion in equity in PGA Tour Enterprises. These grants, which vest over time, will be based on career accomplishments, recent achievements future participation and services and PGA Tour membership status, and grants are only available to qualified PGA Tour players. So in other words, the players are now getting equity in their product. So as the PGA Tour product goes, so do their pockets. That's me paraphrasing there at the end. And I want to hold that thought because I do have something from a player that I do think we're going to need to talk about later. As I come to you with this, not a ton of quotes from PGA Tour players so far, but perhaps some tweets that maybe we can mention. The obvious part of this that people will wonder about is, well, where does LIV Golf lie in all this? Where does the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, the PIF, lie in this? We had John Nucci on another podcast. If you haven't listened, I encourage you to listen to sort of you talked about some of the legal aspects of things after Jon Rahm's move to LIV Golf. And, we reminded listeners then, and I'll remind listeners again, there was no actual merger between the PGA Tour and LIV Golf. There was a framework agreement that the two came to back last June, and that framework agreement has not amounted to a business partnership as of yet. Now, a big reason for that was that the Department of Justice had a lot of questions for that merger, for that partnership, for that framework agreement. Things as much as included, the non-compete to everything, in terms of not poaching each other's players. That was taken out. That's what allowed Jon Rahm to go to LIV Golf. But specifically, it certainly seems like the Department of Justice does not want a sovereign wealth fund from another country, the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, being the dominant partner of this new enterprise. I don't necessarily even mean that. That does not mean majority investor. That perhaps means plurality investor. There needs to be someone in the eyes of the Department of Justice, it appears, that needs to be investing more money than the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia. So now you have Strategic Sports Group, SSG, who has stepped in with $3 billion at a $12 billion evaluation. And that is a healthy investment that could end up being the dominant investment. The language here in the press release specifically says, let me get this right for you all. The transaction announced today allows for a co-investment from the Public Investment Fund in the future, subject to all necessary regulatory approvals. That's in paragraph 2 of this press release. So very upfront, we are still trying as the PGA Tour to get this investment from the PIF. We're still trying to work out a deal, and that still is ongoing, and there's a co-investment opportunity here. So we know that Jay Monahan and Yasser Al-Rumayyan met about a week, maybe I believe a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and that there's progress being made there. We know that there is a deadline that has been extended to around April. So that conversation continues on. As long as that co-investment does not happen, LIV Golf, at least that's the baseline of it, LIV Golf continues on. LIV Golf is is having its first tournament of the season this week at Mayakoba. I could not tell you for the life of me why LIV decided to put their first 2 events of the season at Mayakoba and in Las Vegas opposite the AT&T Pebble Beach Pro-Am, a signature event with the best players in the world playing the most iconic course in the United States outside of Augusta National, and then followed next week by, I know the WM Phoenix Open isn't a signature event, but from a fan perspective, it is one of the most watched events out there. So I'm surprised that this is the decision that they made to go up against the 2. But as of now, they continue to operate independently. What is to come of things is there are still a lot of questions. Today I think gave the PGA Tour the first step to an American-based private equity group jumping in as the dominant investor. That is a notch on the PGA Tour's belt. For fans, this is a good thing. This is a move in the right direction. This is a step toward unity, not a step toward division. This is trying to figure out how to make all of this work. So big move by the PGA Tour. The PIF it's now in the PIF's court for when they want to get in and feel that they are in a position to get in with the right investment and be a part of all this with SSG and with the PGA Tour, the players themselves. And then on top of that, with I guess I'm also looking on my TikTok script right now that I had earlier, where I said that basically it just comes down to what PIF's number is with a slightly lesser investment of SSG, and then that should be able to get through the Department of Justice. Now, there's a couple caveats to everything. A lot of people have been talking about Rory McIlroy in the last 24 hours in the last few weeks. Is he changing his opinion on everything? He said yesterday at Pebble Beach, kind of the idea of having these players from LIV Golf, if they have PGA Tour status, which is important. Players like Brooks Koepka, not Dustin Johnson, because Dustin Johnson technically resigned from the PGA Tour, but a player like Brooks Koepka, who has not resigned from the PGA Tour, still has his past champion status, still can jump in theoretically pretty easily if he's been paying his fines, and can, in a merger world, in a world that those players are accepted back, can jump in much easier than some of the players who have resigned, some of the players who didn't necessarily win as much as Brooks Koepka won on the PGA Tour and didn't hit certain benchmarks. Now, Rory also makes this statement, and maybe fans aren't thinking about this and the media isn't thinking about this as much. A lot of what I read there about the grants that the players are going to have, the equity grants. I said here, these grants, which vest over time, will be based on career accomplishments, recent achievements, future participation in services, and PGA Tour membership status, and grants are only available to qualified PGA Tour players. That's important because some of these players, maybe if they came back, there would be certain caveats that, hey, you can come play for prize money, but hey, not to name names, but hey, Phil Mickelson, hey, Jon Rahm, hey, Bryson DeChambeau, maybe you can't come back and play for the same amount of equity as some of these players who have stayed, who are up and coming, are going to get. So that's something that still remains to be seen. One maybe area of skepticism, Josh Carpenter, who does an awesome job covering golf for Sports Business Journal. Really, if you're not following him, at Josh A. Carpenter, does an outstanding job following all of this stuff from a legitimate sports business sense. He said, quoting a Bob Harig tweet that said, Bob Harig said the SSG deal with the PGA Tour that is to be announced today in the memo sent to players. This is an important sentence. The transaction announced today allows for the co-investment from the Public Investment Fund in the future, subject to all necessary regulatory approval. I said that earlier. Josh Carpenter quote tweets this and says, many believe DOJ approval would take a year at minimum, which makes 2026 a logical starting point for when all sides would be unified. Now, the pessimistic look at that is, oh man, we have to wait till 2026 to have a unified golf tour. I think that is maybe pessimistic from the sense of maybe that's when kind of all of the dust will be cleared, and that's when there will be one tour. I don't know if that necessarily means that you have to wait that long to see Jon Rahm play against Rory McIlroy on a weekly basis that isn't the PGA Tour. I think that we're going to see how quick things might move. I know that from the LIV Golf side, from the PIF side, they're paying these players, some of them 3-year, 4-year contracts. I thought it was mostly 3 years. I've heard a lot of 4 years. We haven't seen a lot of these contracts, but it seems like maybe they are under contract through 2025. Some players through 2024, some players through 2026. I think the PIF is going to have to decide, when are they going to cut this all loose and cut their losses on their investment and just go to invest in a unified golf world and move forward that way. So maybe we see LIV look a little different, say, in 2025 or the rest of 2024. There's been a lot of talk about, I've always said, I look at the Aramco Team Series on the LET side as perhaps that could be what we'll see on the PGA Tour / DP World Tour / Unified Golf World, in terms of what that is a series of events that contribute to a team's standings and have their own prize pot and pay players for appearances and play around the world. I believe 4 events in New York, London, Saudi Arabia, and Singapore, I think they've done in the past. So there's a lot of ways that they can do that. So again, the optimistic look of what Josh is saying is that maybe it takes a while for everything to get through the DOJ, but there's a way for players to start playing together outside of majors sooner. The pessimistic look would be that it's going to be a long time. And then I want to read just a quote from Max Homa, who has a knack for having these moments, where he shared something on Twitter, because I saw a lot of tweets today. A lot of people, look, if your friends don't want to listen to this podcast because they're tired of all this stuff, I get it. I had Claire Rogers on this podcast. It's been my most listened to podcast so far in the short tenure of Eyes on Golf. And she basically said she doesn't want to hear it anymore. And she tweeted something similar today. There's a lot of people that just don't want to hear this. But if you do want to hear this, I don't think today is a reason to be pessimistic. I think today's announcement only will get us closer to unification and not to further division, as I think people, just because of frustration and sort of fatigue over this after a while, I think a lot of people feel that way. But all in all, I think that this should be a positive sign. And Max Homa said this about 3 hours ago. So he said around 12:26 p.m. Eastern time, 9:26 a.m. over at Pebble Beach. I know everyone is sick of hearing about how much more money golfers are getting. My optimism lies in the main point of this, which is we now have very savvy and experienced stakeholders who have a lot of incentive to improve the product creatively and make it better for the fans. There were a lot of responses here. Golf Unfiltered said, how are the fans benefiting from any of this, Max? And Max Homa said, because this investment group isn't just donating money, they want to make money. So they need people to watch golf to make money. So they better do a damn good job to make this more watchable and entertaining for the fans. So I think that what Max is saying there is, one, the players now have an incentive to perform at a higher level for themselves, right? The players, I tweeted this is the meritocracy of all meritocracies, right? The better the product is, the more fans are watching, the more engaging, the more revenue the PGA Tour is making, the more money that the players are getting, the higher return they're getting on their equity. The stakeholders, and there was a report out there today that there were a lot of people that wanted to get involved in this investment. So if you don't think that golf or the PGA Tour is a smart investment, there are a lot of people with deep pockets out there who want to get involved in golf, and specifically the PGA Tour. And these people want to get a return on their equity investments. So there's a lot there, I think, in terms of a lot of people do want to make this money. A lot of people do want to be involved, and a lot of people want to make sure that this product is being moved forward. So again, to wrap up this mini podcast, Strategic Sports Group, a $3 billion investment into the PGA Tour at a reported $12 billion valuation. The PIF, the Public Investment Fund, they are welcome to join in as co-investors when they are able to reach this agreement with the PGA Tour. And all of this will go into PGA Tour Enterprises, which is a for-profit venture that differs from the 501c6 that the PGA Tour has been a nonprofit organization for a number of years. There are a lot of questions about what's going to happen with all the charities that the PGA Tour donates to. That remains to be seen, but the PGA Tour has been pretty adamant that they will continue on to honor so many of those, if not all, based on the schedule of those charities that they have contributed to. And this does not necessarily mean that the PGA Tour, as the organization that puts on these events, the nonprofit, is necessarily going to be dissolved. So still a lot to settle from the business side, but all in all, a big day, an investment, money ingested into the PGA Tour. I believe there's it will cover domestic costs for the next 5 years. I don't want to just bury that, but that's another report out there about this, not in the press release, but basically how the media is interpreting this. So we will see more of that coming up. I did an interview this week with Christina Kim. I'm hoping to get it out later this week. I decided with this news, we're going to wait a moment because I do want you all to enjoy that. Christina was awesome, as engaging and as informative as you would expect, as she is she's starting year 22 on the LPGA Tour. So that'll be a more wholesome podcast coming up. But I appreciate you tuning in for Eyes on Golf, and stay tuned for more some reaction podcasts, but many interview podcasts as well.